Ahoy, scallywag! Welcome aboard the ghost ship Renegade Files, your passage into paranormal adventures, unsolved mysteries, and covert culture. You are now a part of the crew, and I'm your captain, Lex Gordon, setting sail with the tide from the Jungle Villa outpost deep in the uncharted tropics. This is Renegade Files episode 130, Pirate Ghost Stories, Haunted Lore, and Ghost Ship Legends. From the cursed voyage of the Flying Dutchman to the headless ghost of Blackbeard, pirate folklore is filled with phantom ships, haunted treasure, and restless spirits. Today, we set sail on the treacherous seas beyond the edge of the map to explore 10 of the most chilling pirate ghost stories ever told, where history, legend, and the supernatural clash on the high seas. This episode was so fun to research, and it combines two of my favorite subjects, ghosts and pirates. Growing up deep in the uncharted tropics, with water and islands on all sides, I've heard stories of pirates my whole life. This episode gave me a chance to retell some of the old tales I know, and to learn some new things about pirate lore that I've never heard until now. So batten down the hatches and hold fast as we set sail into Renegade Files episode 130, Pirate Ghost Stories, Haunted Lore, and Ghost Ship Legends. Find everything Renegade Files has to offer at therenegadefiles.com. Pirate Ghost Stories, Haunted Lore, and Ghost Ship Legends. Tale number 1, The Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman is likely the most famous ghost ship in maritime history. Its origins trace back to the late 1700s, when sailors told stories that focused on the Dutch East India Company and their exploits on the high seas. This particular ship is usually associated with Captain Hendrik van der Decken or William van der Decken, depending on what story you read. And often people attribute the term the Flying Dutchman as being the name of the ship, but it is equally as likely that the early stories referred to the captain as the Flying Dutchman. Most of these stories take place, or at least start out, somewhere near the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, a notoriously rough part of the sea, and traversing around that tip of South Africa, extremely treacherous, dangerous at the best of times. And so the way the story goes is that at one point during a particularly violent storm, this Captain van der Decken, who was a captain of a Dutch East India Shipping Company ship, decided to go around Cape of Good Hope, the tip of South Africa, and it became extremely rough, and despite all common sense, he refused to turn back and kept going. He swore to the crew that he would round the Cape of Good Hope, quote, even if it takes until Judgment Day. So that oath allegedly cursed the ship and the crew because they did not make it around the Cape of Good Hope on that treacherous passage, and they were sunk in those terribly cold, rough, frothing waters. Now, after this, that's when this ship starts to be seen by other sailors. The ship becomes a glowing phantom. They see the vessel in storms. They see it in locations where it shouldn't be, or where no other ship like that would be expected. They see the ship with no crew on deck and no sails, a big black hulking mass, seemingly empty in the roughest of waters. Traditionally, it's considered bad if you see it, an omen of death, foretelling a shipwreck or some kind of disaster. So there's been numerous sightings from the 1800s all the way through the 1900s. One of the most well-known and retold was the future King George V, who was on a ship reportedly recorded a sighting of the Flying Dutchman near Australia in 1881. And shortly after this sighting, the sailor who first spotted the ghost ship and pointed it out fell from the rigging to his death. So this is a good example of how something that may not be the cause can be attributed, and that's a lot of times how maritime folklore sort of grows. These incidents that are, it's the old story of, someone who saw a crow and then the crops died and they blame the crow. Sort of that sort of superstition would be a good way to put it. So variations include the ship being seen as far away as the Caribbean, and everyone's familiar with Pirates of the Caribbean, the movies. We have the Flying Dutchman with Davy Jones, and then there's a lot of things in those movies that come from actual pirate and ghost pirate folklore. One of them is that there's a variation of this Flying Dutchman legend that says that the captain gambled with the devil himself, a game of dice where the devil challenged him for his soul, and the captain lost and became doomed to sail the seas forever. And that we see that in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie too, a sort of variation of that. There were stories that there was a murder aboard the vessel, and that the murdered seaman, as it were, bedeviled the captain for all of his days and is the one who instigated him to continue against all common sense around the Cape of Good Hope and end his life and the life of the crew. So that's another version of that story. And there's a lot of folklore that ties the sighting of this ship with preventing other ships from making port. So it doesn't always end in shipwreck or sinking, but there have been stories where crews of sailing ships, so this would be 1800s, 1900s, spotted what they believed to be the Flying Dutchman and then fell into some kind of bad luck, like the wind stopped and they were stuck in the doldrums for days and that kind of thing, or they ran aground. All of those attributed to these the curse of the Flying Dutchman, so called. So it's one of those stories that sort of kicks off this episode. It's very famous. It's been retold. It's impossible to tell fact from fiction anymore, but the stories are always sort of that the Flying Dutchman is, if anything, a herald of woe. So watch out if you see the Flying Dutchman. Number 2 is another arguably very famous story, and that is the story of Blackbeard's ghost. So Blackbeard is a real pirate. He was known as Blackbeard. His real name was Edward Teach. Is that how you say that? I've had this conversation before. I think just one second, I'm gonna look it up.
Edward Teach.
Okay, I've looked it up and I can't find anything different, although I have heard someone say it differently and I just can't remember how it was. I'm going to go with Edward Teach. Let's just call him Blackbeard. How about that? If you know how you pronounce his name in the proper Old English, you can write it in a comment if you're somewhere on the podcast that lets you write comments, and spell it out phonetically and put the little gizmos all around on it, and then we'll all know. I don't know. I always thought it was something different, like, you know, it's one of those maybe British names that isn't pronounced the way that it's spelled. You know what? This would have been a good thing for me to look up before I started recording the episode, but I didn't. Anyway, so what happened with him was he was obviously this sort of notorious pirate, okay? Everyone knows the story of Blackbeard. He would put incense in the braids of his beard and make it look like it was smoke coming out of his beard, and he would have 20 pistols tied to bandoleros around his chest, and big, tall, menacing, black-haired figure with a smoking beard, and a scary guy. Most of the stories tell us that it was a big, not that he wasn't a mean guy, okay, surely he was, but that most of his victims, let's just say, that he would capture on the ships, they would just give it up, surrender. They weren't going to go through it. They had heard the stories, and a lot of pirates operated by creating a menacing reputation to make their job easier. When they did capture someone, people would say, well, I've heard the stories, I think I'll just join his crew and turn myself in and save myself the torture. So anyway, Blackbeard had a long career. He had multiple ships. Queen Anne's Revenge, that's his most famous ship. He plundered the Caribbean and as far up as the northeast of the U.S. He sort of liked that mid-Atlantic region, it seems. He basically tried to retire there and moved to an area near Ocracoke Island, somewhere in that area of North Carolina. And he actually entered into a deal where the then governor of North Carolina, offered to pardon him. So he sort of basically agreed to give up his pirating ways in exchange for a pardon if he would just basically stop attacking everybody and join the side of what was looked upon as the good guys, the British naval forces at the time. At least not attack them. That was sort of the deal. So he did that, and he kept his word for about a month. And then he started, I think he attacked 2 ships after that he wasn't supposed to. So then enters into the conversation Lieutenant Robert Maynard, who was the mayor's assistant, or the junior, whatever they would have called it back then, the vice mayor, if there's such a thing. But he was also a British naval captain, and he gathered a force of several ships, and under what was called the most extreme secrecy imaginable, set out to, because Blackbeard had gone against his word, this Lieutenant Maynard had enough and said, that's it, we're going to get him. So they set up a little fleet, and they wait until Blackbeard and his crew had been drinking all night, so they were all hungover and sleeping it off. And just before dawn, Maynard's small fleet attacked the ship that had Blackbeard on it. But what happened is they miscalculated their approach, and their ship ran aground on a reef before they could reach Blackbeard, or just before. So the commotion woke the sailors on Blackbeard's ship. They all got up. Blackbeard taunted the guy, basically said, like, come and get me. He's standing on the deck swigging whiskey out of a bottle, and it comes to blows. They enter into a scrap. They maneuver around each other. They board each other's ships, and one of the members of Maynard's British naval crew shot Blackbeard. And the story is that it sort of hit him in the shoulder, and he was hammered on either North Carolina moonshine or rum or whiskey, I don't know what, but probably more than one kind of alcohol. And he was blazing with his smoking beard, and basically said to them, "Is that all you got?" And they shot him again, and he pulled out his sword, and he was like, "I'll get you." And he goes after the guy who was shooting him, and they shot him multiple times, and he kept moving forward, and finally the adrenaline wore off, and they gunned him down, and he fell overboard. And they say that his body swam around the ship 3 times before they finally got him, and they wanted to fish him back out because the governor or mayor or whatever the official body was that had finally had enough and offered a reward for his capture had to have proof of his death. So what they did is off with his head, hung the head from the mast, sailed back into port, and the dreaded Blackbeard was dead on November 22nd, 1718. So after that, the ghost stories started almost right away. There were sailors that said they saw his headless body swimming in the harbor. They said that they reported his apparition near the inlet in a small boat, a pirate with no head. That seems crazy, doesn't it? They would see phantom lights walking up and down the beach. That seems to be a recurring theme in pirate ghost stories, these lanterns. And there's an area near Ocracoke Island in North Carolina that's called Teach's Hole, like a bay that's attributed to Blackbeard because it's named after him. And there are people who hunt for his treasure there because his ghost is seen there so often. And the treasure hunters claim that Blackbeard's ghost guards his hidden treasure, and that you have to maneuver your way around this ghostly pirate apparition if you ever have a hope of finding it. Now, has anyone ever found any of Blackbeard's treasure? Not that we know of. If they have, they're not saying anything. I guess they don't want to pay the taxes to North Carolina or enter into some custody battle with Spain. I'm not sure. You hear stories like that where who actually owns those kind of things if they are found hundreds and hundreds of years later? I guess that's a different question for a different episode. But anyway, Blackbeard, fearsome pirate whose ghost still haunts the shores of and the out islands of North Carolina. Cool. Which brings us to story number 3, The Ghost of Captain Kidd, and that's Kidd with 2 Ds. So this is Captain William Kidd. He was a Scotsman who sailed the Atlantic coast of the New World in the late 1600s, and he was an official privateer for England. And anyone familiar with pirate lore, if you've seen a movie or two, would understand that a privateer is someone who has been given basically a license to pirate against the other side. So England offered privateer employment for sea captains and essentially allowed them to plunder French ships mainly, and during that sort of golden age of piracy. But eventually, though, William Kidd drifted further and further from his commission until he essentially turned full pirate, started capturing ships of all flags, plundering their cargo and precious metals, and mostly abandoning their crews on whatever shore was closest. In 1685, he was commissioned by the Earl of Belmont, who was the English governor of the area that is New York, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. That sort of all fell under the control of the Earl of Belmont at the time. And for whatever reason, this Earl of Belmont commissioned with a new sort of privateer contract that would allow Captain William Kidd to sail to the Indian Ocean and hunt down French ships for the crown. And so he did so, but he did not fare as well in the Indian Ocean as he did in the Caribbean and Atlantic coast. He ran afoul of a bunch of bad luck. There were storms that beset him that destroyed his ship. He was mutinied upon by his crew, and at the same time, the French ships there, for whatever reason, were much more capable or at least they were ready for him. So they sort of fought back a lot harder than he was expecting in a lot of cases. So it just didn't work out for Captain William Kidd in the Indian Ocean. In 1701, the tides of what was considered right and wrong in the British court began to change, and so they hung a lot of guys out to dry that they had used during their wars and made privateers and then branded them as pirates after the fact. It's scandalous, but it's true, and no honor among thieves, whether government or pirate, I guess. But anyway, in 1701, because of this shift in political opinion of the day, the British court convicted Captain William Kidd of piracy, even though they were the ones that sort of hired him and instigated him into it in the first place. But before his death, it is said that he buried treasure somewhere in New England, that he had made his way back there, or perhaps before he headed off to the Indian Ocean. It's also a good bet to safeguard, because he didn't know what he's going to run into over there. Maybe he had plans to come back to New England, and so he buried his treasure there, it is said. And most accounts say that the treasure is on Gardiner's Island, Long Island, and that's New York, or Oak Island in Nova Scotia. So somewhere up there. That's a pretty wide area to look, but that's what the stories tell us. Numerous reports describe Captain Kidd's ghost appearing near what are the rumored treasure sites. And it's interesting, these stories are cool, that Captain Kidd is always preceded by a blue glow or a flickering blue light. Witnesses claim to see lantern carrying apparitions, once again the lantern thing, guarding what they imagine to be buried treasure chests. Some treasure seekers report hearing chains and digging sounds or disembodied voices warning them away. And folklore tells us that Captain Kidd cast a spell over his buried treasure. So this is a very cool story. This is where we get into some of the almost like supernatural connections of pirates that dip their way into some of these tales. So Captain Kidd, as legend has it, cast a spell over his buried treasure so that it could only be recovered under certain supernatural conditions. So you can only dig up Captain Kidd's treasure with 3 people at midnight when the moon is full and when it's directly overhead. The 3 people must form a triangle around the exact spot where the chest is buried, and as they dig, they must remain completely silent. A single word spoken will break the spell and cause those digging to miss the chest, no matter how much, how deep, how wide they dig. Cool. So the ghost of Captain Kidd is said to always be menacing. He comes with a warning to leave his treasure undisturbed. And these stories became so widespread in the early 1900s that many New England residents refused to go search for pirate treasure after dark. They would wait until the next day. Cool, right? Which brings us to tale number 4, the ghost crew of Dead Chest Island. So this is really cool. This is a story that I did not know about before. And what's interesting about it is that I learned that Dead Chest Island, also called Dead Man's Chest Island, is a real place. It's in the British Virgin Islands. So Dead Chest Island is associated with the famous pirate song, 15 Men on a Dead Man's Chest, right? Which I think was from, was it Lewis Carroll's Treasure Island? Pretty sure. 15 men on a dead man's chest. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. Drink and the devil had done for the rest. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. So the dead man's chest referred to in the song is actually the island called Dead Chest Island, which is let's see, legend claims that numerous pirates were marooned there and left to die. So these were the 15 men. So when it says 15 men on a dead man's chest, I always thought it meant like piled up on a dead guy, but really it's 15 men on the dead man's chest, which is the island. Cool, right? Anyway, decades later, when those men would have been long gone from this earth, sailors reported pirate ghosts on that island at night. One story was told by a small private crew that consisted of two couples who had moored their sailboat in what's called Dead Man's Bay, of course it is, right off the island, and they were staying there overnight, and sometime in the winter of 1980. Now, they described hearing singing and drunken voices on the shore. They initially thought people from a neighboring boat had gone up to the island to party, and they looked through the binoculars, and in the dim light from a cloud-covered full moon, they did indeed see what appeared to be several men dancing and carousing on the sand, obviously drunk and bottles in their hands. Then as the clouds passed and revealed the bright full moon, in that light, they saw that these men were actually skeletal pirates, bare bones and skulls, wearing tattered pirate garb, passing bottles and staggering along the shore. When one of the women on the sailboat dropped her binoculars and screamed, the ghost pirates vanished into thin air. And this story made the rounds for years. Others have reported seeing lantern lights swinging along the shoreline where no people are present to carry them. That's always creepy. And local folklore says that the dead pirates still gather to celebrate their final night of rum as their stores ran out, the men that were marooned there. So that's cool, right? So cool. Strong connections to Caribbean pirate mythology, of course, and the birth of pirate folklore. So all of that goes back to this real place, Dead Chest Island in the British Virgin Islands. And I think the song and the book Treasure Island probably had a lot to do with promoting this idea. Of course it did. So anyway, cool, super cool story, a real place. Oh, also, you can jump into the Patreon. I'm going to put some pictures up because the pictures of Dead Chest Island, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. British Virgin Islands, emerald water and rocky coastlines and sandy shores. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. A little bay. I mean, it looks like that typical picture, like if you drew a pirate island when you were a kid, that would be it. Okay, so this brings us to tale number 5, The Pirate Ghost of Charles Vane. This is an awesome story. This is like as piratey as it gets. Charles Vane, he was one of the most feared pirates of the golden age of piracy. He was active in the Bahamas and the Caribbean during the early 1700s. He kept the best and fastest ships from the ones he caught, and he organized a small fleet of fearsome pirates. Very well organized, very disciplined, and effective. He commanded what became the pirate town of Nassau in the Bahamas, where he had his home port. So as a group, the ships commanded by Charles Vane disrupted almost all of the trade moving through the Caribbean between England and the Americas. It got to be such a problem that in 1718, the King of England sent an entire fleet of ships to regain control of this pirate stronghold in Nassau, and also with the express mission to capture Captain Charles Vane and his ships. So the British ships sailed over, they blocked the entrance to the harbor, and they sent a small boat with a messenger on it who delivered to Vane a letter from the king giving Captain Charles Vane a chance to surrender to be brought back to England for a fair trial, as they say. So Charles Vane sent the messenger back to deliver his reply, which was written on the back of that message, one word: no. So as the message boat returned, Charles Vane shot a single cannon shot that perfectly struck that boat's mast and took off the British flag. Vane then sent his largest ship. He piled it with coal and set it on fire and set it to sail loaded with gunpowder kegs toward the flagship at the center of the British fleet that was blocking the harbor. The British sailors panicked when they saw this, and before they could turn their ship and get out of the way, Vane's ship crashed into them and exploded. Right out of a movie, right? Now, in the chaos, Charles Vane slipped past the blockade in his smallest, fastest sloop, and he was gone. Now, even though this made him essentially a folk hero among the pirates of the day, he was eventually mutinied upon and marooned by his own crew. He escaped whatever island that was that they had left him on, but the British authorities discovered and captured him eventually, and he was hanged in Jamaica in 1721, and thus ended one of the most successful pirates of the Caribbean ever. Captain Charles Vane died in 1721, hung by the British authorities, hanged, as they say. Bahamian folklore claims that Vane's ghost still wanders the remote cays and uninhabited bays of some of the Bahamian islands that he frequented. And fishermen report seeing a ghost pirate that they believe to be Vane carrying a flaming torch along the shorelines, and then he'll just sort of vanish in the air. They see phantom campfires. Sometimes these appear on otherwise deserted islands, and when people go ashore, they find no fire there. Some stories claim ghostly voices can be heard on some of the islands arguing over treasure, and for whatever reason, they attribute it to Captain Charles Vane, one of the most famous ghost pirates of the Bahamas. So cool. So it seems that even though they did catch Captain Vane in Jamaica in 1721, that he's still out there trying to find his hidden treasure. You can find everything Renegade Files has to offer at therenegadefiles.com. Bonus episodes on Patreon, merchandise in our shop, the Renegade Signals articles on Substack, and every episode archived. Your one-stop shop for all things Renegade Files is therenegadefiles.com. And this brings us to tale number 6, the Palatine Light. So this is connected to a wreck near Block Island, which is off of Rhode Island. Very heavily woven into pirate and maritime ghost stories. The story dates back to this wreck of a ship called the Princess Augusta. And that was in 1738. And according to legend, for whatever reason, the passengers were abandoned aboard a burning vessel. I guess it was like every man for himself. The ship caught fire. People jumped and escaped, but the ones who were left behind died on the flaming ship, and it drifted out to sea into the darkness. And ever since then, witnesses have reported seeing a ghostly burning ship offshore. Pirate smugglers and privateers later adopted this tale as proof that cursed ships roamed those northern Atlantic waters, and they sort of used it as a way to scare the locals or to just sort of generate more pirate lore around their own comings and goings. It's one of America's oldest ghost ship legends, and this repeated sightings of this ship have been going on basically nonstop for over 300 years at this point. Pretty cool. Then we have the treasure ghosts of Oak Island. So this is in Nova Scotia, Canada, Oak Island. Ever since the late 1700s, rumors have linked Oak Island to pirate treasure. It's just one of those places where there were rumors of pirate treasure being buried there. Some of the stories we've talked about already, others that we haven't, but it seems that it sort of was a rumor that stuck. It's connected to Captain Kidd, who we spoke of, and other Pirates of the North Atlantic. Numerous treasure hunters have died searching for it. It's just, you know, it's rugged, it's the outdoors, and people who aren't up for it are out there, and accidents happen. Legends claim that pirate spirits guard the treasure. And there was a really good one. What was it? Okay, right. Yeah, right here. Reports include shadow figures, mysterious voices, once again, phantom lanterns. And the story is that 7 men must die searching for the treasure before the treasure will be revealed. So that's sort of a combination of pirate treasure and supernatural guardians. And it keeps the story alive, tragically for some who go searching and don't come back. So if you do, go look for the Oak Island treasure. Ye be warned. Bringing us to story number 8, the ghost ship Octavius. So this is a creepy one. It's, let's see, this was Greenland around 1775. This was a real ship that someone found, the Octavius. It was another ship came upon it, and they saw no one on board. And when they boarded the ship, they found every sailor frozen solid. The captain supposedly still sat at his desk, frozen with a pen in his hand. And the logbook indicated that the ship had been drifting, and when they checked the dates, that was years ago. So some versions claim that the crew attempted a northwest passage and became trapped in the Arctic ice, and they all froze there. The ship, after being discovered by this, I guess another merchant ship, they tied a rope to it, and they were going to tow it back, and they entered into a fog bank, and when they came out of the fog on the other side, the rope was in the water and the ship was gone. That's classic. I think I've seen that in a pirate movie before, and if I did, maybe they got that idea from this old ghost ship story. There are historians who question the authenticity of the story, but sailors don't, and they refer to it as the floating ghost crew. It's always, once again, if you see it, if you see the ghost ship Octavius, not a good thing. It sort of foretells disaster or someone dying on your own ship, that kind of cursed vision that we get a lot of in Maritime. So creepy, right? Imagine that, all frozen. So this brings us to tale number 9, the ghost of Fairman Mundaka. So this is based on a real 19th century pirate and smuggler. This is in Isla Mujeres in Mexico. Mundaka was a pirate, a successful one, and amassed a great amount of wealth. On Isla Mujeres, he built an estate that covered what would be 40 acres of property. It had a big house, gardens with stone walls and arches and walkways. It was filled with exotic plants, rare fruit. He had areas where he had exotic animals, so like monkeys and iguanas, and basically like a little private zoo. And he was, as I said, successful, wealthy. He employed a lot of people in the area. He basically went out pirating, and then he would get all the stuff that he collected and bring it back to Isla Mujeres and outfit his little store with it. And the prices were great because it was all profit. That idea is not unique, that MO, to Fairman Mundaka, but he did do it there. And what happened was he became obsessed with a local woman known as Martiniana Gomez Pantoja, and they called her the Brunette. And she was, by all accounts, beautiful, but also, according to the stories, very young. They don't really say how young she was, but if they're saying she was too young for him in the 19th century, we can bet that she was probably pretty young. But essentially, she was just a beautiful young local girl, and he was the big boss hog pirate of the town, and drew a lot of water in that community, right? So he had built this amazing estate, and he began trying to sort of court this beautiful young girl, And so he started carving her likeness into the walls and the archways of his estate. He even named it after her. He thought that his sort of display of wealth would win her over, but it never really did. She spurned his approaches, and she ended up marrying a younger, sort of regular commoner boy that she knew. And this enraged the pirate Mundaka, and it sort of broke his heart. He actually, when he found out that she couldn't be his, he began building his own crypt, and he carved into the end of what would be his tomb, his sort of above ground mausoleum crypt, a skull and crossbones, because he said pirating was the only thing that gave him joy after this beautiful girl turned him down. And that crypt is still there. I have pictures of it in the Dark Intel files on Patreon. You can check it out, and it is phenomenal. It's amazing. I guess he was quite a stone-mason, gifted sort of carving skill that he had. So anyway, he died. He ended up, it was interesting though, he was never put in the mausoleum. He fled, and he died on another island, they say, of a broken heart in 1885. And so because his tomb is still there, but he's not buried there. They don't know where he was buried. He on whatever island he fled to. And so local legend says that his ghost still wanders the grounds of his hacienda, which is essentially, I wouldn't say a ruin, but definitely overgrown, and there's no house left, and just sort of some rocky gardens in the jungles of Isla Mujeres in Mexico. But that because he was never buried where he wanted to be, that his spirit made its way back there, and it haunts the graveyard. People see a man dressed in 19th century pirate gear leaning against the crypt, and then when they turn back, he's gone. They see him in the gardens. They see him in some of the places downtown, in the bars and stuff. It's just one of those persistent ghosts that just never goes away. People hear footsteps and voices near the property, and he is considered one of the best known pirate ghost legends in all of Mexico. And so it's a very sad, romantic, but heartbreaking story of Fermin Mundaka, who carved a skull and crossbones in his own tomb, only to die somewhere else and now haunt the graveyard with his restless spirit. Awesome. So that brings us to the last story today, which is number 10, Jean Lafitte's ghost at Lafitte's blacksmith shop, and this is in New Orleans. So Jean Lafitte lived from 1780 to 1823, one of the most famous pirates and privateers, a smuggler, a folk hero of the Gulf Coast. He operated a vast smuggling network south of New Orleans, and he later aided General Andrew Jackson during the Battle of New Orleans in January of 1815. This is very important because up to that point, New Orleans had always had varying loyalties. They had been settled by the French, they had some Spanish ties, and when America began gearing up and doing its thing, they were sort of indifferent, but they all loved Jean Lafitte, the pirate. He made their lives good. He provided income. It's said that he employed up to 1,000 people at one time because, much like the pirate Mundaka in Mexico, Jean Lafitte had a store in New Orleans, and he would ransack ships off the coast, and he would attack British ships, and he would bring the goods back and sell them for deals in his stores. He gave people jobs. And the other thing that he was able to do is he had connections in France. And so during this time, so this would be around the early 1800s, 1810s, there were blockades and boycotts of importation of certain goods into the US, particularly from France at the time. And so a lot of the French citizens in New Orleans turned to the pirate Jean Lafitte because he could get them things from France that they wanted that they couldn't get here. I really don't know what. Maybe French wine, French ingredients, French oil, French, I don't, what were they bringing? I'm not sure. But for whatever, cloth, certain things, whatever it was that they found to be important for the French living there, Jean Lafitte was able to deliver when no one else could. So he was a hero of the people. So that becomes important because when he decides to ally with General Andrew Jackson during the Battle of New Orleans, that caused a lot of the population of New Orleans to sort of join that fight as well, and probably turn the tide in the Battle of New Orleans 1815 in Andrew Jackson's favor. Very interesting. Lafitte had a blacksmith shop, and it was located and still is located at 941 Bourbon Street in the French Quarter of New Orleans. It's one of the oldest surviving buildings in the city and dates back to the 1770s, the Spanish colonial period. So the deal was that that building was technically and legally a blacksmith shop, but really they say it was a front for his smuggling operation. It was where they would bring and distribute a lot of the goods would come through there. And so they stored things there at night, and historians, debate the exact connections, but the association is deeply embedded in New Orleans folklore that's what was going on there. So sometime later, they turned the blacksmith shop into a bar, and now it is still a bar, and it's called Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop Bar. Quite a mouthful, but for decades, employees, patrons, tour guides, and paranormal investigators have reported sightings of a dark-haired man who is believed to be the pirate Jean Lafitte himself. The most common sighting occurs near the rear of the building and around the piano area, where witnesses report seeing a man dressed in period pirate clothing who sits alone and then suddenly disappears. Bartenders have reported seeing an apparition reflected in mirrors, only to turn around and see no one there. That's a classic, right? Visitors frequently describe cold spots moving through the otherwise very humid and warm rooms, especially near the fireplace and the back rooms. Other paranormal reports include unexplained footsteps, phantom voices, glasses moving on their own. People will suddenly smell tobacco smoke when no one's smoking. Objects fall from the shelves without explanation. Basically, it runs the gamut. All the paranormal things happen in Jean Lafitte's, what is it called? Blacksmith Shop Bar. Visitors say that one persistent legend is Jean Lafitte's treasure remains hidden, and that there is treasure hidden somewhere in that building, in the walls or maybe beneath the structure. And according to the story, a ghostly pirate stands guard over the treasure and warns anyone away who gets too curious. So what they say is, if you want to see the ghost of Jean Lafitte, the pirate, you have to, go to the blacksmith shop bar, sit there at night and hang out with a couple of your buddies, act like nothing's going on, and then start having a little whispered conversation among yourselves that, hey man, I know where Lafitte's treasure is hidden. Someone told me. I have a map. Or whatever, that kind of thing. And when you start whispering about knowing where it is, that he will show up. Let's go try it. That sounds cool. I also want to say that I got this story out of a really cool book, which is called Spirits of New Orleans, Voodoo Curses, Vampire Legends, and Cities of the Dead, which was written by Kayla Ambrose and given to me by one of our RFA agents on Patreon. And I'm not going to say his name out of courtesy and privacy, but you know who you are, and thank you so much. So I am enjoying the book, and I wanted to include this story in the episode because it's outstanding. So another French Quarter tale says that people see in this bar glowing red eyes. They move, it's obvious, they seem to be disembodied. Sometimes they appear in like a cloaked, hooded figure that's like as much smoke as it is shadow, that kind of thing. Ghost, right? What else is going on there? There's a few things here. One of the things that's added a little bit of weight to the mystery or the persistence of the ghost stories is that no one knows officially exactly how the pirate Jean Lafitte died. Most historical accounts say he died somewhere in the Gulf of Honduras around 1823, but there's conflicting stories that maybe he made his way back to New Orleans and died there, because if he would have done so under secrecy. It was not good time for pirates by then. They were chasing them down, good, bad, indifferent, even ones that were war heroes. So it's possible that he did make his way back to New Orleans and died there. We just don't know. In local folklore, they say that he never really left the French Quarter. So whether he's guarding his hidden treasure in his bar or watching over his old smuggling operation there, it just seems like his spirit lingers, and he's one of the most famous ghosts there. People say he comes there to have one last drink, or that he's just a permanent resident of Bourbon Street. And it would be cool to go there and see if we can find him. You can find everything Renegade Files has to offer at therenegadefiles.com. And my summary is, I don't have a big detailed one. It was fun going over all these stories. What could be more exciting for the summer than to talk about pirates and haunted ghost ships and old pirate treasure legends and lore? It's just the coolest. I never get tired of hearing those stories. And I hope that you enjoyed some of these, and I hope that you learned a few new things as I did in the process of doing this most excellent pirate episode. So thank you sincerely for investigating pirate ghost stories with me. Subscribe or follow this show right now so together we can meet here next time and explore all the crazy stories about UFOs, aliens, hauntings. We can go on some paranormal adventures together, dig into some conspiracy theories, and try to unravel a few unsolved mysteries. I am sincerely glad to have you in the Renegade Files crew, and thank you for listening. Thank you to all of the amazing RFA agents who support this show on Patreon. You can join them today for bonus episodes, the Dark Intel Files research for each episode, and other fun things that I make just for the RFA agents and no one else. You can try it for free for a whole week, and I'll see you in there. And remember, anything you want for Renegade Files, you can find at therenegadefiles.com. That's where all the links are. One-stop shop. And until our next adventure, I'm your host, Lex Gordon. Stay wild, phantasm child.